Hi everyone, it's Jen again. Hope you're having a good week. This week, from a development standpoint, was a really good one. I had a lot of fun creating the retro dungeon crawler aspect of Esper's Guide, and I did post on it on my Blue Sky and got a question about creating this movement system in renpy, so I thought I would go ahead and make a video. I just want to start with a disclaimer that I am just a self-taught hobbyist, so take my approach with a very small grain of salt, and if anybody has any suggestions how to make a better system, please feel free to comment that. And let me just go forward, and I'm going to stick to mainly concepts more than like getting into the individual code, because again, I think that what I've made is pretty specific to my game, and I don't know that it would really like serve as a great template. It's probably a little bit of an obtuse or roundabout way of creating some things, so I encourage you, if you are interested in making a 2D first-person dungeon crawler, this is a very hyper-specific niche, then yeah, just take what I'm doing with a grain of salt. Let me first go ahead and kind of show what this looks like so far. We have these composite backgrounds that are made of 13 different parts that are set up to display, with every location having 4 images associated with it depending on which direction the player is facing. So there is some like environmental consistency to the way that these images are displaying that will hopefully make the player feel like this is a consistent space that has some cohesive feel to it. Now, I have been working my way up to creating this movement system in the last 5 years. Pretty much every game that I've made, for the most part, has some type of location and exploration system built into the story. So I think that this has always just been like a hyper fixation of mine. But I don't really plan on trying to make this like more immersive, as far as like I have no desire to make like a 3D dungeon crawler with like real-time movement or anything like that. To me, and maybe I'm just like super old school, dungeon crawler has a very specific connotation that was like a very specific moment in time before 3D environments and graphics took off, and maybe at the height of like what they were pushing like 2D graphics to try to achieve. And it was born out of limitation, right? That's why I think it's kind of hard to find any documentation on trying to create this particular aesthetic, is because there's sort of this assumption that this approach was only taken because of like the 3D graphics. Actual 3D environments weren't a thing yet in most games. So why would you want to go back to inferior, like hardware inferior graphics? But to me, it's not about creating a lifelike feeling of going down a tunnel. I would probably, I don't know, just want to go out to the woods if I wanted that experience. There is something about the word, even like crawling, dungeon crawling, that I don't really get from modern 3D graphics. There is something about this movement system not being animated, that we are just kind of like populating these composite images as we turn, quote unquote, and we move, quote unquote. The images, again, kind of vaguely give you a sense of environmental consistency, but because there's no animation, And because the lighting is not realistic, and the textures are not realistic, and the perspective isn't even necessarily realistic, there's something very disorientating about like every step you take, that you're very aware that like I am moving one tile forward. And if we can ignore that the map is here, like playing these older dungeon crawlers, you could just like kind of like spin in a circle and then you could forget what direction you're facing because everything looks the same, and every time you change your perspective and you move forward, it's disorientating. And I guess a lot of people would see this as a problem to solve, but to me, this level of disorientation isn't the same as like getting motion sick. I'm nauseous. This level of disorientation is very like subtle to me, where it just makes me feel a little bit uneasy and apprehensive. Not that something's going to jump out of the shadows and murder me at any moment, but just a little like, do I know where I am? Like there's, and it's not like a conscious thought or conversation I'm having with myself. I think it's really on like a subconscious level. Like, where am I really? Is kind of the question that just kind of like simmers under my subconscious when I'm playing these games. And that level of uneasiness just kind of makes me more aware of like every single step I take, that I'm moving like one tile forward. And yeah, it makes it feel more like a game than reality. But in my mind, that's okay. It's okay to have that distinction. And that feeling of crawling, I really only get that feeling with this particular aesthetic. Like other types of dungeon exploration that are done in real time or with smoother graphics, you can move like 10 steps and it in like a second or something. And it doesn't feel like crawling, it feels like you're just moving. Versus in these dungeons, especially when you don't have like a map here to like keep you orientated and grounded, it really feels like every step that you're taking, like 10 steps can feel like very substantial. Because I remember playing these games when I was younger and being like, wait a second, do I know how to get back? Like, if I run out of resources, am I going to be able to find my way back to the entrance even after just taking like 10 steps? And some people could say that, well, that's a really like poor game mechanic. Like, why would you want to do that? That's horrible. But for me, it was part of the crawling experience that like I felt a bit like a newborn that was like on shaky legs, that like, do I really want to go another step, or do I want to hold on to the table and like crawl back to safety while I still can? And I feel like that feeling is just not present in modern day exploration games. And maybe I'm wrong in that, or maybe I'm in an unpopular opinion in that. But that's my personal fixation with this particular aesthetic. So I don't want to say that my goals have been met, because I don't really like enjoy remaking the same types of games. So like if I move on from this game, will my next game have this same dungeon aesthetic or the same dungeon system? Like, I'm sure I'm gonna want to add something to it, but I have no desire to go into like smooth movement and 3D and real time and all that kind of stuff. And certainly I don't think that like I would want to do it in renpy, like just because like I want to force the engine to do something it's not designed to do. That's not my goal in this either. I'm not trying to like be impressive by like, I don't know, taking a visual novel engine and trying to like bend it to do something that you could do easier in another engine. I'm again going to reiterate this point also, that this game is still primarily story and dialogue. That will still be like 90% of what I'm doing in this game once I've set up all my systems. So knowing that at the start, that is why I'm continuing to use renpy, because I did have it in my mind that I wanted to move on to Godot at some point if the gameplay elements start outweighing the story elements, but I don't foresee that happening yet, so I'm sticking with renpy. And with all that preface out of the way, with me gushing about why I'm so obsessed with this particular aesthetic, let me explain the systems again. So, excuse me for digressing. What do we have here? We have the location system and the movement system and the map systems I have created in Arcane Dice Wars. We have a screen here that is the view and movement button combined. So what happens here is that I'm facing west currently, and if I press west again, I will move forward west. And if I press in a direction that I'm not facing, I will simply turn. So in this case now I'm turned to the south orientation of this location. And if I try to move forward and there's a wall there and I can't move, it's going to do this shake screen. And I stay in the same location. Now I don't have to turn fully. I can just go the opposite direction if I want to face. And what this looks like in the programming is that, I guess first of all, I have the pieces of the background. And these probably could have been done even more efficiently. Like I have two separate images for left and right of like the same artwork. So you could probably just do a transform in here to make it easier. Or sorry, not I didn't do a transform to save on space because just flipping it and putting it in here again was like easier to get in here and just like start working and testing. But I guess if you wanted to go in there and optimize it more, this is already like pretty tiny files with it being compressed to WebPs and only having like 13 of these pieces. So I'm not too worried about like taking up too much space in this game. We have the different views here of like the full wall, of like the kind of like the full corridor of only being able to go straight, and then we have like these partial walls. Where is it? Partial walls where I would be able to turn and move and on the like right side here and the left side. So like how this looks when it's like composited into different arrangements. You know, here you can see there's like a full wall and a partial wall, and we have like the little distance screen here. The ceiling and the floor will always be consistently part of the scene, so that's why I've got that labeled as the base. And you can see like the little distance thing here is overlaying on top of that. So rather than having to like build each one of these views in each one of these rooms, I have them as kind of like set up as the composite images, where we have here, and I have each arrangement labeled, and there's actually like 41 different room types because it starts at 00. And as I was setting up each one of my location properties, so each one of these tiles has a number here, and we can see here on my map, my blueprint here, this is what the full map looks like. It's just 43 tiles in this particular floor of the dungeon. And each one of these has its own location properties. So each one of these locations has a name. It has this as a label that I jump to. It has which directions you can move, so if it's none, then you can't move that in that direction from that location. This is north, south, east, and west. and it has a corresponding image that it's going to show, depending on if you're facing north, south, east, or west. And as I was making these, or assigning these properties to each one of these locations, I was looking at my map to see, okay, can I move north? Can I move south? And I was also looking at the adjacent room that I'm facing, because you can see here on this, well, I guess I gotta move someplace where maybe I have more options. Let's see if I go west here. Then I go north. Nope, that's a dead end. But see, I can see that there's a dead end, even though I can still move north. And now I'm at a dead end. So you can see, the player can see a tile adjacent to the direction that they're facing. So I had to keep that in mind when I'm assigning the images. So like here, even though I'm inside of a dead end, I can't see, I mean, I can see that moving south, I'll be able to move in the left and right direction. So when I move south, even though I can't move south again and I'm facing a wall, I can still see that I can move either east or west, which I could see from like one adjacent tile away. So when I was assigning the images, I had to keep that in mind. I had to kind of look and see which direction I'm facing in, what the movement would be in the tile adjacent to the direction I'm facing, if that makes any sense. So what did that look like when I was making these assignments? I was looking at these sheets. I had printed these out, which these are just showing the image assignment of like what the player would view. So I was like, okay, I'm looking at my map. I'm looking at my map. I'm currently trying to assign the properties for room, 01. And I'm imagining if I'm looking north, then I will be able to move to my right, and I will see like a dead end, a wall. And to my right is like a dead end. So I know that that's gonna be now. I know now because I've been staring at these things for quite some time. I know now that that's going to be this arrangement here. It's going to be showing image A136. Yeah, I'm probably not like normal. I probably got some kind of different wiring in my brain that I actually find doing stuff like this like fun. Do I recommend this to everyone? Do I think that everybody's going to want to go out and use the system? No, that's why I preface. If you have a different way of making things work to chase this aesthetic, please link your tutorial, your guides, your documentation below. But this is how I have my system set up. And maybe it's not something, maybe there's a lot of better solutions out there, but I actually like, I don't know, in my mind, this is how I perceived it. Like when I was playing these types of games, this is how I imagined it would work. So maybe I'm totally off, but when I think about like working with like just fixed 2D images that are just like drawn in a perspective, and when I think of like the types of memory that they had to work with, that they would have had to be reusing these images in pieces, I feel like it would have been something similar to this. Like maybe I'm totally off the mark, but I'm happy with the result, and it has the aesthetic and the feel that I was looking for. And I'm planning on moving on into my into my combat system. Oh, let me go ahead and just also talk a little bit about, as I talked about how the locations work, how the screens are set up for this this little movement and view wheel. So The way that the screens are set up is that much like the backgrounds, these are like little pieces that have the hover version and the idle version. So when we look at the images that are corresponding to the movement wheel, we have each one of these buttons for the different directions that you could be facing. With the wheel itself, I have different screens for the different views. So I have like this north wheel for when you're facing north, and the north is going to be when you hit north again, you're going to move. So when you're moving in the same direction that you're facing, when you hit the button, it's going to call the set location where it's going to have you change location, and then when you're looking around, it's going to show the images that are associated with the new location. If you can't move in that direction, like if the direction is set to none, then it's just going to do that shake action, and you're not going to move you're not going to move to a different tile. If you are hitting one of the other buttons that is not in the direction that you're facing, then you're just going to turn to look, which is going to change the direction that the player is looking, and it's going to change the wheel that's being displayed to now is going to show the east movement wheel when you're looking east. And these are all call screens so that the game does not advance. It's waiting to get the input from the player hitting one of these buttons. So the game is essentially paused right now until the player hits one of these buttons on this screen when you use the call screen as opposed to using the show screen. This here is a show screen, so the game is going to keep moving without requiring any input from the player. This will have a button in it eventually, but I'm just going to make it a modal true. But it's not going to require input from the player for the game to progress like this button will, because I don't want the game to advance without the player interacting with this. So there are going to be events that happen during the game as the player is moving through the dungeon. So those events will play out before, and this button will disappear during those moments. And this button will only reappear when it needs the player to start moving and looking around again. Okay, I think I've gone over this the best that I can. Let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, I hope you have a good upcoming week. Stay safe. The weather here been crazy. Lots of storms, lots of storm damage. Hopefully, hopefully we're getting over that, because the temperature's just been going all over the place. So there's been like tornado warnings and stuff like that. But thankfully, I've come out unscathed, and nobody I know has had any major damage or gotten hurt. So yeah, hope you have a good upcoming week. I'm looking forward to diving into the combat. I think it'll take me longer to figure out, though, than the movement, because of the new systems that I want to try to build around the card aspect. Okay, take care, and don't forget to enjoy the process. Bye!